Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Snowbeck. Today we are going to do Unit 6, Lesson 3, and we are going to start a topic that you have never studied before. We are going to study trigonometry. Now, trigonometry comes from the word trigon and metron. Trigon means triangle, and metron means measure. So trigonometry is really the study of the measures of triangles. So it's like about the angles and the sides of triangles. One of the things that we've learned over time is that if you have triangles with the same angles, like let's say we have a 30, 60, 90 triangle, and then we have a smaller one that's 30, 60, and 90, their sides have the same ratio. And so what somebody did is they programmed those ratios into our calculators. And today we're going to start learning about how do we find those ratios and those missing lengths of the sides in triangles. So before we really start using sine, cosine, and tangent, we have to figure out in a triangle, how do you tell which side is opposite of an angle, which side is the hypotenuse, and which side is adjacent to an angle. We're going to have some important words to learn. And so the three trigonometric ratios that we're going to learn today are called sine, cosine, and tangent. And so let's say we wanted to find the sine of A. We're going to do this part right here. We're going to find the sine of A. Well, the sine is always opposite side over hypotenuse. So what we do is we go to capital A. Capital A is this angle right here. Then we have to find the side that's opposite of it. Well, all the way across the triangle, little a, or side CB there, but see the little a, is opposite of angle A. So the opposite side is little a. And the hypotenuse is always across from the 90. It's always the largest or the longest side in the triangle, so little c is our hypotenuse. So the sine of A compares the side opposite of A to the hypotenuse, or A over C. Next, let's do cosine. So let's do the cosine of A. The cosine of A compares the adjacent side to the hypotenuse. And you might be thinking, well, what's an adjacent side? If you ever have to mow your lawn, you know that first loop around your yard where you're mowing right along your neighbor's yard? That neighbor is your adjacent neighbor. They're right next door to you. Your yard has a boundary that shares with their yard, or shares a boundary with their yard. So adjacent means right next to. So if I'm talking about angle A and I want to know what side is adjacent to it, I have to figure out what side touches it. Well, B touches it and C touches it. They both touch right here at angle A. But C is already the hypotenuse, so that means B is the adjacent side, right next to angle A. So adjacent would be little b, hypotenuse would be little c. Let's do the tangent of A. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So opposite of A, remember that's a cross, so that's little a. Adjacent to A, remember that was B, right next to it. Okay, let's practice this again. So I'm going to erase all my marks, and let's do the other side here. So I'm going to go and I'm going to try to find the sine of B. I'm over here on the right side. So this time we're going to go to angle B, which is down here. And we have to do opposite over hypotenuse. So what's opposite of B? Little b. What's the hypotenuse? C, because remember that's the one that's across from the 90. Let's try cosine of B. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Well, I know the hypotenuse, that's C. So now I just got to figure out what's adjacent to B. Remember, adjacent means it's right next to it. So right here and right here, they both touch angle B. One of those is the hypotenuse, and one of those is adjacent. This one is the hypotenuse, so this one is the adjacent. So it'd be little a. Now we're going to do tangent of B. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So opposite of B, little b. adjacent to B, little a. This might not make much sense yet, so let's go ahead and move on to the first example and put some numbers in here. Number 1, express each trig ratio as a fraction and as a decimal to the nearest tenth. Okay, so I want you to remember sine, cosine, and tangent. Sine was opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine was adjacent over hypotenuse. And tangent was opposite over adjacent. Okay, so let's remember this while we work. Part A, we want to find the sine of J. So we go to angle J right here, and we have to think about sine. Now remember, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So what's opposite of J? I'm going to write that up here. This is going to be opposite over hypotenuse. What's opposite of J? 5. What's the hypotenuse? 13. So 5/13 is the fraction. But if you read the directions carefully, it says they want the fraction and the decimal. So we're also going to have to do 5 divided by 13 on our calculators. So type that in, 5 divided by 13. And you should get approximately 0.38. So those are the sine of J. Let's try the next one. Let's do cosine of J. Now remember, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. We're comparing those two sides. So go back to angle J and think, what's adjacent? What side is adjacent? Well, remember, it has to touch J, so it's either the 12 or the 13, but the 13 is already the hypotenuse, and so the adjacent side must be the 12. The hypotenuse is the 13. Okay, so there's the fraction. Now we have to type in our calculator 12 divided by 13. We get 0.92. So there's the fraction and the decimal. Next, we're going to do tangent of J. Remember, tangent is opposite over adjacent. So what's opposite of J? 5. What's adjacent to J? 12. Now do 5 divided by 12 on your calculator. And I'm going to say it's 0.42 because 0.41666 would round to 0.42. Great, let's go to part D. Now we're going to find the sine of K. So remember, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, but this time we're going to work with angle K. So this angle. So remember, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So what's opposite of K? 12. What's the hypotenuse? 13. We already did 12 divided by 13. That was 0.92, so I can just use that from before. Why don't you pause the video and try E and F. See if you can get these last two. So cosine K should be adjacent over hypotenuse, which is 5/13, which is 0.38. And tangent of K should be opposite over adjacent, which is 12 over 5. If I type that in my calculator, I get 2.4. Cool. Let's try one more. So to start out, I want to remind you about sine, cosine, and tangent. Remember how sine is opposite over hypotenuse? Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. Well, that's kind of hard to remember. So somebody came up with a little mnemonic device, a little way to memorize, and it's called SOHCAHTOA. And SOHCAHTOA stands for Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So if you can remember SOHCAHTOA, then you'll remember the order that the ratios go in. So sine of C, go to angle C. Think about sine. Sine is SO. S stands for sine. So it's going to be opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite of C, 24. Hypotenuse, 26. Remember, hypotenuse is always the longest side. So there's our fraction. Now we also have to do the decimal. So 24 divided by 26. Type that in your calculator. I got 0.92. Will you please pause the video and try the rest of these and then unpause the video when you're done? Okay, so part B, we're going to do sine of t. So this time you go to t and you have to do sine, which is opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite is 10. So it's 10 over 26. 10 divided by 26 is 0.38. It's funny, these are the same decimals that we got last time. That's a fluke. That's just lucky. Doesn't always happen. Let's do cosine of C. So remember, go to angle C. So angle C is here. Cosine SOHCAHTOA, remember it's adjacent over hypotenuse. Adjacent to C is the 10. Hypotenuse is the 26. So 10 26, which we already know is 0.38. Let's do cosine of t. So cosine of t, remember cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So adjacent is 24, hypotenuse is 26. So 24 over 26 is 0.92. Now let's do the tangents. Tangent of C. So we're going to go to angle C. Remember, tangent is opposite over adjacent. SOHCAHTOA. O is for opposite, A is for adjacent. So this is opposite over adjacent. So opposite of C, 24. Adjacent to C, it's either the 10 or the 26, and the 26 is the hypotenuse, so it must be the 10. And then divide them, and you get 2.4. Again, it's just a fluke we're getting the same decimals as last time. And then tangent of t. So we're going to do one last one. We have to go to angle T. So angle T is right here. And we got to do tangent. So remember, it's opposite over adjacent. So it's 10 over 24 this time. And 10 divided by 24 is 0.42. Well, that wraps up Unit 6, Lesson 3. So now I want you guys to go try the practice. Unit 6, Practice 3. Let us know if you have questions. Have a great day.